Alright, hey everyone, just wanted to take a second and look over all the games I released last year, because I think it was a big year for me in games and a big step in my journey, in that I really fell into the groove of the process of how I make games, and how I, from start to finish, actually, finish something. And it doesn't always work out, but there were a few. I think there were several. How many? Like 6 or so releases. So that's pretty good. I thought I'd talk about that because let's see. Yeah, the scale of the projects I think was really important as well. I did a combination of medium and large scale projects in addition to game jam games, a couple of game jam games. So there was a wide spectrum of things going on. Anyway, first off, I'll talk about the first one I released, Puzzle Tiles. I was working on, I think, medium projects, so a few months. I was really happy with it because I like the graphics. I don't know, maybe they're not the best, but I personally like them. I think the level design was very good compared to what I thought I was capable of at the time. I think it was much higher standard of quality than I had initially anticipated it would be. Yeah, and it was just, I liked it. It was really good. It was fun for me to play, which I think was huge. And then I think the sound effects were also pretty fun. And it gave me a good sort of intro to practice level design. And that was something I really wanted to focus on, at least sometime this year, or sometime ever. And I think that gave me a good chance to do that. Next, Dungeon Brawler is a roguelike where you can play with multiple people or by yourself and with AI players. And this was another medium scale project, probably around the same duration as Puzzle Tiles took in terms of actual time working on it. Of course, discounting the time it spent sitting on the back burner. And I think this one was good as an introduction into user interface, user experience, user interactions, right? Because I spent a lot of time trying to make it the screen shake and the particles and things like this feel really nice and really juicy to the player. I even made a video on it, right? And I don't think it did too great, but I think it serves as a good lesson on, what not to do and what to do. It was a good learning opportunity. And really, I was more happy with that than, having any success with the game itself, right? I think, all these were way more of a learning opportunity than an, money making or anything else opportunity. And I think that was good. I think that was important. Let's see. Over the summer, right? Laggy Racing. This was a game jam, so this was kind of in the slog in the middle of the summer where I don't get much work done. But I ended up doing a game jam. It was, what was it about? I think it was Out of Control. Game Maker's Toolkit, maybe? I don't know. Anyway, Laggy Racing. I don't think it turned out very great. There were a lot of reasons for that. It was 3D and, it was a racing game, and I'd never released a game of either of those types. I barely even play racing games, let alone make them. So I think those were sort of factors setting up for failure, in addition to it being a shorter game jam, right? Only 2 days. And, making a game type you're not familiar with is fine, but making it in 3D can cause a lot of complications. So I think, again, that was a learning opportunity. And it let me experiment with AI. I think I finished a AI class at the time. So I was experimenting with AI. I think each individual car, all 10, have their own unique AI that controls them. And they don't all work, but it was a learning exercise of saying, okay, well, this is what does work. This is where the glitches arise. So that was, I think, also pretty big of a game jam, I guess. On the rails, yeah. I think this one turned out really well. It was also a smaller game jam. I don't remember the theme, but maybe multiplayer. Yeah, and it was local co-op, as, most beginners tend to do, right? Which is fine. And it was a puzzle game where you I guess you see it right now, where you push the tracks into place. And I think the combination of the visuals and the sound effects and the music, to an extent, made it really, really cool. And so it wasn't really a learning opportunity as much as it was just really cool. And it's still, even now, fun to play with, boot it up with a friend and try to mess up the rails. So yeah, that one I think turned out really well. And I think I did that at the same time as this next one, really zoomed in dungeon. I think the game jams overlapped, but this one was over 2 weeks, I think. And so a little longer, right? And this one, I think it turned out fine for a game jam. It was meant to be in a small space of pixels, so like 64 by 64, which was, I think, hard to deal with. But I think it turned out, fine. I don't know. It basically ran into the problem of most of my games where I run into not having the motivation to continue halfway through. Well, this was that way. With a few weeks, it's like, you have enough time, you have the luxury of not working for a few days, and I think that actually ended up hurting me, rather than if it was a shorter, weekend or like, 4 or 5 days of a game jam. Then it's harder to justify, for your brain to justify, like, hey, let's not work on it at all. You keep your motivation throughout the whole duration, pretty much. So I think that was the problem there. And of course, it being a game jam, I really wanted to finish it. Whereas with a real game, I can just set it on the back burner for months or even years and not even worry about it. And then they turn out, great eventually once my motivation comes back, which does take a while sometimes. It's a problem I haven't solved. But anyway, last one. This one is one such project, Crystal Hopper. I've been working on it for, I think, like almost 2 years before I released it. Although not constantly, it was, I started a while ago and worked for a month and then stopped. And then a few months later, I worked for a week and stopped, and that kind of process. So that's why I ended up looking and I guess feeling the way it does is disjointed. My I guess code quality and my standard of designing levels and just games and experiences in general has changed throughout making it. And so I think it feels kind of disjointed, if that makes sense. Like, it doesn't feel like it was made by the same person, I guess, even though it was. And like dissonant, right, in the way it works. And I think the lesson to learn from that is don't put stuff on the back burner too long, maybe. Or something like keep motivated on a project for smaller bursts more frequently, rather than large bursts with larger spaces in between. Because I think when you do the smaller bursts, you might want to work on it more, but you'll still keep your motivation up rather than burning out and then coming back to it months later, having to relearn everything. It just ended up taking longer than it should have. I mean, the whole project could have been finished in 2 months maybe. And I think the actual time spent working on it probably added up to around that much, maybe 1 to 3 months. So I think it turned out fine. I think it was fun, for that matter, but it just feels like there could have been so much more that I could have done with it, and I just wasn't able to due to the code being, years old by the time I got to making the final features. It's like harder to work with everything by that point. So that was disappointing, but I think it was good to get it off my plate, get it off the stove, right? Get it off the back burner and just, okay, we're clearing that out, clear out the cache, work on some other stuff now. And so looking forward, few projects on the back burner for this year, and we'll see how those turn out. Stay tuned. I'll see you later.